You are not staying here!
Please, give me a chance, I'll work.
You are a fear to my children.
Imagine standing in a kitchen, watching the last pieces of your life, your few belongings, shoved into an old bag. Your sister, the only person who truly loved you, is gone. Her husband, your brother-in-law, stands before you, his voice cold and sharp as a whip. You are not staying here. You plead for a chance, promising to work, but his voice cuts you off. He blames you for eating through the family's meager savings. He calls you a fear to his children. Then, he shoves a train ticket into your hand. A one-way ticket to Silver Creek, Montana territory. Your last hope, your Aunt Margaret, who promised you work, has just died of fever. You are being sent away to a place where no one knows about your broken engagement, your shame, or your past. You are being sent away to nothing. This is the moment Emma Hartley's life ended, and where her true story of being chosen began. My life was already broken. 3 months after my sister, Sarah, passed away, James, her husband, looked at me like I was a terrible burden. I was useless, shameful, and I had nowhere to go. "Don't you dare speak my wife's name," he'd snapped, slamming the worn carpetbag shut. The children, Sarah's babies, were watching from the doorway with fear in their eyes. I begged to say goodbye, but James refused. "It was better this way," he said. They were already upset. The only thing he offered was a small basket. Inside, bread made from my sister's own recipe. That was it. I was alone on a wagon with nothing but a bag, a basket, and a single ticket west. 3 days later, I stepped off the train in Silver Creek, Montana. The station was somber. A funeral procession was passing the church. I needed to find my aunt, Margaret Hartley, the only person who had offered me work, who promised me a fresh start. I approached a woman in mourning clothes and asked about Margaret. The woman's face softened and tilted. "Oh dear," she said, "you must be Emma, Margaret's niece." The ground tilted beneath my own feet as I heard the news. Margaret had passed 2 weeks ago. The fever had taken her. The boarding house she owned, the job I was promised, was gone. I had traveled all this way for nothing. I followed the woman to a meal at the church hall, a numb ghost standing at the edge of a gathering of mourners, 259. I heard the whispers. "Poor thing, came all this way for nothing. Look at the size of her. No wonder Margaret never mentioned her." I found a corner and sat down. When I opened the basket and broke off a piece of my sister's bread, the taste brought back everything I had lost. And then, I cried. That's when they appeared. 2 identical girls in black dresses stood before me. "Miss, are you sad?" they asked. I tried to wipe my eyes and hide my face, but they insisted. "You're crying. We cry too. Our mama died." My heart shattered. I was so sorry for them, and they responded with such a pure, devastating kindness. "Then we should sit with you," the other said. "Sad people shouldn't be alone." They nestled close to me, and I broke them 2 pieces of the bread. When they tasted it, their eyes widened. "It tastes like Mama's bread," one whispered. In that moment, all 3 of us, the lost aunt and the grieving daughters, were crying and holding each other. That's when their father appeared, Thomas Bennett. Broad-shouldered, weathered, he was stunned to see his girls clinging to a stranger. The girls explained, "She's crying, Daddy, and her bread tastes like Mama's." I tried to pull away, apologizing, but the girls begged me, "Don't go, please don't go." Then one of them, Violet, asked the question that would change all of our lives. "Daddy, can she be our new Mama?" Silence fell over the whole hall. Whispers rose up, but Thomas silenced them by addressing Mrs. Fletcher, the town's most judgmental woman, with a quiet warning, 508. He looked back at me, studying the grief, the kindness, and the way his daughters chose me. "What's your name?" he asked. I told him, "Emma Hartley." He didn't hesitate. He offered me his hand. "Come with us. My ranch is 2 miles out. There's work if you want it. Room, board, fair wages." He paused, looking down at his girls, and his voice softened. "And 2 little ones who haven't smiled since their mother died. Until now." He didn't know anything about me, but he said, "I know my daughters. They haven't asked for anything in 2 years. That tells me enough." The girls pulled me up, and as the whispers rippled through the hall, I barely heard them. All I felt were 2 little hands holding mine. This wasn't just a story about a lonely rancher, Thomas Bennett, or the idea that a widowed rancher thought his wife died years ago, until twin girls walked in and called him Daddy. No, this was a story about two little girls who knew they had found a heart that belonged with theirs. The wagon ride to the ranch was quiet, except for the twins' cheerful chatter. They introduced themselves. Violet was older by 3 minutes and asked if I liked horses and chickens. I felt a sliver of lightness I hadn't known in years. The ranch came into view as the sun set. It was a sturdy house, but tired. The porch sagged, the barn leaned, and the fences needed mending. It was a home that had been loved, but now suffered from neglect. Inside, the house was dim and cluttered. Dishes were stacked, dust was on every surface, and toys were scattered. It was the home of a man who was grieving and doing the best he could. The girls led me to a small room that used to be their mother's sewing room. It was sparse but clean, and the girls announced proudly that their father said maybe someday someone would need it. I woke before dawn, a habit from my years working in a bakery. I couldn't sit idle. I lit the stove, filled the basin, and began to clean. By the time the sun rose, the kitchen was sparkling, the floor was swept, and bread dough was rising by the warm stove. The twins walked in and looked around in utter wonder. "You cleaned?" Daisy exclaimed. "The house hasn't been this clean since Mama died." I quickly said I hoped it was all right, but they hugged me tightly. We worked together, their small hands dusted with flour, as I showed them how to knead the dough. When Thomas came in from the barn, he stopped in the doorway. His gaze swept over the clean kitchen, the giggling girls, and the rising bread. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "I wanted to earn my place," I told him. He stepped inside. "You already have a place," he said, his voice rough. "My daughters chose you. That's enough." Later, as he finished the breakfast I'd prepared, he paused at the door. "If you're going to work outside," he said without looking at me, "you'll need different boots. Yours won't last." A few days passed, and a pair of worn but sturdy boots appeared on my doorstep. No note, no explanation, but I knew who they were from. The days fell into a hard-earned rhythm. I worked from dawn till dusk, scrubbing floors, hauling water, mending fences, and tending the garden. I never asked for rest or praise. Work was the only way I knew to prove I deserved to stay. Thomas watched quietly, and though he rarely spoke, he nodded approval, or he'd quietly fix something I struggled with. One afternoon, sitting in the garden, the girls asked me about weeds. I said they were stubborn, growing where they weren't wanted. But Daisy frowned. "That's sad. Nobody wants them, but they're just trying to live." My hands stopped in the dirt. They were right. Then Violet looked up at me. "Were you a weed?" she asked softly. "I think I was," I admitted. "Well, you're a flower now," Violet said proudly, "because we picked you." That evening, as I kneaded dough, Thomas came in. He sat down and started to talk about his late wife, Catherine, who fever took 2 years ago. "When she died, part of me did too," he admitted. The girls were too young to understand. They stopped smiling. He looked at me with an intensity that made my heart pound. "Then you came, a stranger, and within minutes they were laughing again. You gave them hope." I insisted I had to prove my worth. He stood and walked to the door. "You don't have to prove you're worth keeping, Emma," he said. "You already did when my daughters chose you." For the first time since my own rejection, I didn't feel worthless. I felt seen. 3 days later, I was preparing supper when I heard the twins' screams. "Fire! Fire!" Smoke poured from the barn. The twins stood frozen, screaming that their father had gone to check on the horses. My blood turned to ice. I shouted at the girls to stay put, grabbed a water bucket, and plunged a cloth into it. I ran toward the barn. The heat was a wall, the smoke suffocating. I yelled Thomas's name, but there was no answer. Inside, the horses were screaming, but the stall doors were open. Thomas had released them. Then I saw him, collapsed near the back, overcome by smoke. A beam cracked above us. The roof was giving way. I didn't think, I just acted. I dropped to my knees, grabbed him under the arms, and dragged his heavy dead weight toward the door. My lungs burned, my eyes streamed, but I pulled. 1 foot, 2 feet. I reached the doorway and pulled him out into the cool night air. 1804. We collapsed together, coughing and gasping. The twins ran to us, crying hysterically. Thomas fluttered his eyes open. "The horses?" he croaked. "They got out," I gasped. "You opened the stalls. They're safe." Behind us, the barn roof collapsed in an explosion of flames. He turned his head and looked at me, his face blackened with soot. "You came in after me." "Of course I did," I said firmly. "You could have died." "So could you," he whispered. You gave me a life, I told him, looking at this man who had given me a chance when no one else would. I just gave you yours back. Something changed between us in that moment. Something deeper than gratitude. Something permanent. It took Thomas weeks to recover. He coughed constantly. I ran the ranch alone. I fed the horses, mended fences, and hauled water. The work was brutal, but I refused to let him do anything but rest. At night, after the girls were asleep, we sat by the fire, and slowly, carefully, we talked about our hidden selves. I confessed that my former fiancé, Robert, had told me I was an embarrassment, that marrying me would ruin his reputation. Thomas's jaw tightened. He was a coward, he said. Maybe, but he wasn't wrong. I'm too much, too big, too... Stop, Thomas commanded. Don't ever say that again. You're exactly right. You saved my life in that fire. If anything, the world's too small for you. As Thomas healed, the air between us became electric. Our hands brushed while passing a tool or reaching for the same dish. The girls noticed. Daddy looks at you a lot, Violet pointed out. And he smiles more now, Daisy added. One evening, we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. I've been thinking, he said quietly. My heart sank. Was he going to send me away now that he was healed? I want you to stay, he said, reaching for my hand. Not as hired help. As my wife. I was stunned. It's fast, he admitted, but I know what I feel. I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life. I hesitated. I'm not like Catherine. You're nothing like Catherine, he said softly. I'm asking you to be Emma, strong, stubborn, beautiful Emma. I whispered that I wasn't beautiful, but he cupped my face. Yes, you are. He kissed me softly, and I kissed him back, tasting a dangerous, undeniable hope. When we pulled apart, he smiled and nodded toward the window. The girls are watching from the window, he said. And sure enough, two little faces were pressed against the glass, beaming. They planned this, didn't they? I laughed. Probably, he said. They're terrifyingly strategic for 5-year-olds. Ask me again, I whispered. Emma Hartley, he said. Will you marry me? Be my wife, my daughter's mother, my partner in everything? Yes, I said, with tears streaming down my face. Yes, I will. Happiness, however, was something Silver Creek wasn't ready to let me have. 2 days after the proposal, Mrs. Fletcher, along with 3 other women, came calling. They demanded to speak with Thomas privately. He refused. Anything you have to say in front of Emma. Mrs. Fletcher told him the church council had concerns about our engagement. Miss Hartley arrived under questionable circumstances, she said. No family, no references, living here, unmarried. She reminded Thomas that his late wife was careful, and that they were only trying to protect him. They deserve a proper mother, she stated. Someone who doesn't bring shame to this community, she said bluntly. The words hit me like physical blows. I tried to step back, feeling the old shame rising, but Thomas held me firm. Get off my property, he said quietly, his words landing like hard hammer strokes. I'd rather stand alone with Emma than with people like you. I told him I should leave, that I was ruining everything, but he turned me toward him. You're not leaving, not this time. I belong with you, he insisted, with us. And if this town couldn't see what a gift I was, to hell with them. 25:57. The girls ran to us, hugging us fiercely, crying, We want you to stay forever. Please don't go. The town's spite showed her the world still believed she was nothing, a burden. But here stood Thomas, a man who saw past all of it. He defied the common story where her parents sold her for being barren, until a lonely cowboy with 5 children chose her by choosing Emma publicly, fiercely, for her worth alone. And in that moment, I made my choice. I wouldn't run. I would stay and fight. 2 weeks later, the fight came to a head. Mrs. Fletcher had filed a complaint with the town council, claiming Thomas was running an improper household and threatening to force the sale of his ranch. That evening, the town hall was packed. Thomas stood at the front. Mrs. Fletcher went straight to the attack. This woman arrived under suspicious circumstances. For all we know, she could be a thief, a con artist. Thomas quieted the room. Emma Hartley came to this town for her aunt's funeral. She had nowhere to go. My daughters, 5 years old, saw what none of you could see. They saw kindness. Mrs. Fletcher snapped that children don't understand. That's when the twins stood up on their chairs. Violet's voice rang clear. We understand that Emma saved Daddy's life, Daisy chimed in. When he was caught in the fire, she saved my father, even though everyone said she was too big. But she wasn't too big. She was strong enough. Thomas walked to me, took my hand, and pulled me to my feet. Emma Hartley has worked my ranch for 2 months, he said, facing the council. She's kept it running when I couldn't. She's cared for my daughters like they're her own. She asks for nothing and gives everything. He then looked them all in the eye. Mrs. Fletcher says Emma is improper, scandalous. I say she's the best thing that's happened to this family since Catherine passed. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Gasps filled the room. Thomas opened it to reveal a simple gold ring. Emma Hartley, he said, his weathered face soft with emotion. I should have done this weeks ago, but I'm doing it now, in front of this town, so there's no question. Will you marry me? Not to save my ranch, but because I love you. Because my daughters love you. Because we choose you. 3018. Yes, I whispered, and then louder, yes. He slid the ring onto my finger and kissed me right there. The twins shrieked with joy. The mayor declared, I don't think there's much point in voting now, is there? 3059. An old rancher stood up and dismissed the complaint. Thomas walked me out the door, the twins glowing with pride. Outside, under the wide Montana sky, he pulled me close. You're mine now, he said. We're yours, and I needed everyone to know it. 3 weeks later, we were married in that same church, 3218. Not everyone came, but the ones who mattered did. I wore a simple white dress. The girls helped me pick it, filling my hands with wildflowers as I walked down the aisle toward Thomas. My head was high. I wasn't a burden. I was chosen. When the Reverend asked Thomas if he took me, he cut in smiling. I do, absolutely, forever. When it was my turn, my voice was steady. I do. As we walked back down the aisle, husband, wife, father, mother, family, I realized something profound. I had spent my life trying to shrink myself so others would accept me. Thomas had shown me that the right people don't want you smaller. They want you exactly as you are. Years later, when people asked me about my wedding day, I never mentioned the dress or the flowers. I talked about 2 little girls who found a woman hiding behind a loaf of bread, crying and lost, and chose to sit beside her. They saved me, I would say, watching those same girls, now grown, playing with their own children in the prairie grass. And Thomas, standing beside me, would take my hand and say, No, you saved us. And both of us were right. I went from being told I was too much to being told I was exactly enough, and I was finally truly home. This story of Emma and Thomas is a reminder that you are never too broken to be chosen, and that kindness often finds us when we least expect it. If this journey of found family and frontier resilience moved you, please make sure you hit that like button. It helps this narrative reach others who need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to Iron Veil Narratives for more heartfelt, human stories of courage, love, and what it truly means to be home. Thank you for watching.